Hello, artists and readers. Welcome back. Last week, we created another Flat Rose extension. We created the Library of Things at the Goodikins Public Library. And one of the things we created in that kit was the Goodikins Public Library's Gnome in paper doll form. And I told you that he was your clue for what our 3D art was going to be this week. And this week, we are going to be creating Gnome homes. So you can get your kit at the library. If you have not already gotten your kit, you can make an appointment to stop into the library, or you can pick one up via curbside. So let me show you what is in our kit. And I am going to share my screen to do that because there's so much in this kit. All right, so this kit is going to have some sticks so that we can create doors and furnitures, and there are more sticks than you need, so you're going to be able to use your creativity and create things beyond just what I show you. So you'll have 6 tongue depressors, 10 popsicle sticks, and 4 mini sticks to create little details out of clay, like little things from nature, little mushrooms going out of the ground. You're going to have some polymer clay and toothpicks. There's also going to be thumbtacks poked in that polymer clay. You're not going to need that for this. I just didn't want you to get poked, so that was the way I came up with to transfer it. So when you get your clay, be very careful to take out those little thumbtacks and put them somewhere safe. You'll have lots of little fun embellishing things, a little hedge, a little tiny stump, 3 wooden discs, a burst of leaves, and a vine of flowers, and a little crystal. And then for your gnome, you will have a cotton ball, an old-fashioned clothespin, and a piece of green and a piece of red felt. You will also have 3 glue sticks. So I highly recommend using a glue gun for this project. If you do not have a small glue gun at home, you can check one out at the Goodikins Public Library from their Library of Things. So the first thing I did is I started by creating my door. You can use the big sticks to create your door if you want. I went ahead and used the small ones. I went ahead and I got 7 sticks because I wanted it to be approximately the size of my little ones. I decided that I was going to have my door an arch with 3 little popsicle sticks at the bottom. So I lined up 3 sticks, and then to create that arch, I placed my stick a little bit lower and a little bit lower, and I did that symmetrically on both sides. Then I put a bead of glue on an extra popsicle stick, and I glued it across to stabilize all of those sticks. When I was done with that, I glued a bead on a small popsicle stick to add a little bit more structure and support. This is going to be the back of the door. I'm eventually going to flip this over and take my 3 last mini popsicle sticks and glue them straight across the bottom. Look at this arch. If you choose to do it the way I did, you're only going to put a dot of glue and a dot of glue, and then your next layer will have 2 dots of glue, and then your layer after that, you can go all the way across. But I'm going to do that on the front, not the back. Once I got the back glued, I was kind of over it, and I was ready to start making details out of clay. So I got my clay and my toothpicks out, and this clay is pretty easy to clean up in my opinion, but I would recommend using like a cutting board or a mat or a placemat maybe when you're working with clay. I sit on the floor, and so I use a cutting board just so it doesn't stick to my floor. So I squished that clay up. That's going to soften it so that it really sticks well together. This clay is really good for mixing colors and for making really tiny details. You don't want this clay to be really big pieces. You want to try to keep it 1/2 inch or thinner. So I use this clay to make things that I would find in nature, like mushrooms and leaves. When you put 2 pieces of clay together, if you just stick them together, when you bake them, because that's pulling the moisture out, and the moisture is what's making them stick, those pieces are going to fall apart. So you need to really find a way to squish your two pieces into one piece. And with polymer clay, I do that by squishing the pieces together with a toothpick and kind of creating grooves and then making them mix together. So you can see that's what I did here. I made my stem of the mushroom and the top of the mushroom, and then when I put them together, I used my toothpick to really turn those two pieces into one piece. You should be able to take your piece and turn it upside down and kind of give it a little wiggle, and it shouldn't fall apart. If it does fall apart, it's going to fall apart when you're baking it. One of my recommendations is maybe don't make everything and then bake it all at once. Maybe make a batch, bake it, and then see how it comes out, and then work on some others. If you make something that you want to poke into the ground, like a mushroom, like something that would be growing out of the ground, or like something that you would just want stable and standing up in the ground, you're going to want to take a toothpick and poke it up into your little clay piece, and then you'll take it out and bake it. Then later, we'll be able to add a little hot glue to glue half of a toothpick, and that way it'll have something that you can stick into the ground. And here I am creating another mushroom, and you can see how those little grooves work really nicely to just add more mushroom detail. I created this leaf by mixing some green and some white, and I didn't overmix it because I kind of liked seeing the different tints that were created in the mixing process. I thought that looked more realistic. Then I just used my toothpick to carve in some lines to kind of show those leaf veins. And I used the edge of my toothpick to just poke into the side to create more realistic leaf texture. So these were the things that I created. The mushrooms, an acorn topper, a little twig to put over a window, some flower petals in a leaf, and then some leaves. And I didn't really know what I wanted all of the pieces for, so I just kind of created things that popped into my head that inspired me, that I thought about nature and gnomes and fairies. One thing is this little guy with the beigey, like the beigey peach clay. I made an itty bitty little ball, and then I squished one side flat to create a gnome nose. And you can go ahead and take a break to say gnome nose 10 times fast. When you bake this, you're going to bake it for 275 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 minutes per 1/4 inch. So polymer clay, like I said before, you don't want to make thick things. You want to make little detail things. So if you have a bunch of pieces like these flower petals or these sticks or these leaves, let me try to find it. I have a clear ruler. That's not really good for this. You can kind of measure it yourselves, my dears. But a 1/4 inch is really teeny and 1/2 inch is really teeny. But if it's a 1/4 inch or less, you can bake it for about 15 minutes. And if it's a 1/2 inch or less, go for about 30. 275 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 to 30 minutes, which is equivalent to 130 degrees Celsius. Now, I created this and included it to help you guys out. And then days later, I thought, you know, we really don't use Celsius that much in America. So I don't know if I was subconsciously trying to broaden our scope, because I love Celsius. I think Celsius makes more sense to me than Fahrenheit. But 275 degrees Fahrenheit or 130 degrees Celsius and 15 to 30 minutes. If you bake it a little lower, then you can keep it in longer. That's what I often do. So then I went back to my door. You can see that I glued those 3 little mini sticks, and then I painted mine. I painted my little discs to be windows, and I just wanted kind of some more dark wood texture, and I just thought Gnome Sweet Gnome was cute, and I like cuteness. You don't have to paint it. I was doing this with an artist, and she left all of her wood pieces completely natural, and they ended up adorable. It was so cute. Those popsicle sticks and those little doors are wood. So it has that natural color and that grain. You don't have to use paint if you want to decorate it with marker or Sharpie. That works awesomely well with popsicle sticks. So then I continued adding details to the door. The door is kind of the star of this kit. I went ahead and hot glued a little window. I glued my acorn topper as my doorknob, and I glued that crystal on as like an extra window. I chose to keep most of my flowers together so that I could kind of create a flower arch over my door. And I also glued that stick on my window. These things are going to poke into a tree for me. So that's what my thumbtacks were for. I went ahead and I hot glued the thumbtack, and then you can see all this globby glue. After I glued the thumbtack, I took little dots of glue and added extra around the edge so it would be really secure. If you aren't doing 2 windows, you might want to add an extra to your door, or maybe you'll end up doing something else. Maybe you'll make 1 window and then you'll make a little flower box, and maybe you'll need your little tack for your flower box. You can also see I globbed the glue onto that flower. So then after my pieces were baked, I took some broken toothpicks and I put a little dab of hot glue and glued those back into the mushrooms. When I was doing my large one, it cracked. That can happen. Polymer clay can sometimes be a little bit brittle. And who knows, I might have done this without a lot of coffee, so maybe I just baked this at 130 degrees Fahrenheit instead of 130 degrees Celsius, and that maybe weakened it. But the point is that's a part of art, and that's one of the wonderful things about being an artist and a person, is things don't always go the way you plan, and then you get to problem solve, and then you get to learn. So I just glued my toothpick into the mushrooms, added a bunch of glue, and then I used those little leaves to cover up the cracks. And then I went ahead and put toothpicks in all the pieces that I wanted to look like they were growing out of the ground. And there you can see my little repair job. So then I started creating my gnome. To create a hat, I wanted a cone. So I cut this triangle. I'm going to kind of show you another way that might make it a little bit easier. If you find something that's a circle, you can trace half of it onto your piece of red felt and just use a Sharpie to draw it. When you cut felt, that can be a little bit tricky. So as a reminder, anytime you're cutting, you are going to get more power with the back of your blade. So same thing with your felt. When I cut my felt, I didn't cut it like this. I didn't even cut it like this. I cut it like this, using the blade at the back of your scissors. If you have a half circle, and then you kind of fold it like a cape, it creates a cone. If you take your cone and you slide your piece, you can create a very tall, skinny cone. Remind you of anything? Like a gnome hat? And then maybe you would just take your bead of glue, press it, and then cut off your ends. You can see that I started with a triangle because I knew that I was going to be making a really pointy hat, and I've done a lot making 2-dimensional things turn into 3-dimensional cones, so I was confident I could do it with a skinny triangle. I used a Sharpie just to give me a little bit of a base. I sort of folded my piece in half, added a dot of glue, and then folded the edge over. And then you can see I kept doing it all the way to the top. Then there's my little gnome hat in the background. There's my gnome nose. I went ahead and painted the bottom of him black. You can use Sharpie or you can just leave him with wood. If I knew then what I know now, I would paint the entire part black. In my head, I thought, well, I was going to dig a little hole and bury this part so that my gnome could stay standing up. But then I kind of struggled and some of the wood showed, so I would have painted it all the way down. I even gave him some little details, some little rosy cheeks. Then I cut a piece for his shirt and I glued that on. And then I cut this strange piece for a jacket. And I was not planning on doing that, but you'll see that I gave you lots of extra felt in case you messed up or in case you had some extra brilliant ideas. Maybe you can cut some leaves or some moss out of this, or maybe you want to make a little gnome hammock. So what this shape was it was just a rectangle, and then I cut a little sliver out of the end, a little triangle in the back, and then I glued the little corners together. You don't have to do that, or you can do it a much more simple way, but that is how I created a little jacket for him. Then I created a belt with a very thin piece of felt. And then I used the cotton ball. I kind of tore it apart and just glued that right on his face for a beard. I glued on his nose right at the edge of the hat. If you want to glue it lower and draw eyes on or paint eyes on, you can. I kind of think that's so cute when I see little gnome decor and the hat's all the way down to his nose. And then I just cut strips and glued them for arms. And I ended up taking apart my flower so that he would be holding a flower. And again, this isn't how you have to do it. This is just how I did it. Oh, he's so cute. But he's still without a home. So, whoopsie daisies. There we go. There it is. I made a gnome, these extra little clay pieces, a sweetly decorated door, pieces to poke into the ground, a couple windows that will poke into the tree just like the door. And with that, I had all these things left. I had plenty of clay left, felt left, lots of sticks left, and at the time, the leaves. If you are going to break apart your sticks, they're very slippery. So I want you to think about protecting your fingers. I also really want you to think about protecting your eyes. My recommendation would be, if your sticks are too big, draw a line on them with pencil and turn them over to a parent or someone who can help you cut those with an X-Acto knife. In the art room at our sculpture center, I do let kids cut popsicle sticks with scissors, but we have special scissors for that. So I would not probably recommend cutting any of these sticks with your scissors at home because they ruin the scissors. That's why Miss Sandra says, don't let me see you cutting the popsicle sticks with our paper scissors. So maybe these can turn into little window boxes, or maybe you want to take your log and use a long stick and put it on its side, and you can create a little teeter-totter, or maybe a swing set, or maybe a ladder, or maybe a fence. The other thing is, just because this is what we're left with, doesn't mean that's all you have. Maybe you go outside and you can find a bunch of sticks, and you can use sticks to create a fence and use these to attach for support. Or when I was doing this with another artist, she was using her sticks to create a picnic bench and a picnic table, and it was so cute. So then you assemble your gnome home outside. I went into my yard and I looked for a tree that I thought had a nice little crook. And then because of the thumbtacks in the back, I could just poke those into the tree, and it's so thin that it's not going to damage your tree. And then I kind of created a little gnome world. So you can see my gnome looks like he's coming home, and the little mushrooms look like they're growing. I found a little piece of concrete and I moved some of our mulch, and then I actually created a little tree. And you can keep going, you can keep creating. There's a little bit of a close-up. It's just whimsical, silly fun. I just think it's charming. I get quite a kick out of this. I am so glad this is in my yard. So thank you so much, my dears, for making a gnome home with me. And again, this is just how I used the kit. You can use your own creativity to do it however you want, whether you want to put your door on a flower pot and all your little details growing out of the dirt of a potted plant, or whether you want to have it in your home, or maybe you have a completely different idea with all the things in the kit. So here's your big idea. What's going to happen if we open the door to that gnome home? Let me go back to my screen. What magical world lives behind this door? Now, you guys know that your art teacher kind of lives in an imaginary play world. And sort of my theory is, if you can be in an imaginary world, or if you can turn any situation into play or a game, you should. But this is our big idea. And so what's behind this door is a tree. There's no home. I want you to think about that. I want you artists to go out and be critical thinkers. We say it all the time that we don't want to judge a book by its cover. And that doesn't just apply to books, and that doesn't just apply to people. Sometimes we see something and it looks very charming and it looks very believable, and sometimes we want to believe it. Be critical thinkers, my dears. Don't just assume there's more, or that what you see is exactly what you're getting. Explore. Be critical thinkers. Find the truth. Find lots of opinions. Talk to lots of people. Read lots of different information, because the more that we can discover, the broader of a perspective we can get, the more information, the more facts we can get, the smarter, better, more critical thinkers we can become. You guys have such brilliant brains. You're so creative. Living in our sweet, magical, imaginary world is wonderful. I love that. I love that you guys add fun and magic to this world. But your big idea, be a critical thinker. Even when something looks good and looks magical, ask yourself, what's really behind that door? What's the real truth? All right, my dears, thank you so much for making this world a better place. Thank you so much for making an outdoor gnome home with me. And I hope you guys just have a magical week until I see you next week.